Charles Egbert Brown, was born on April 15, 1922, in Kaiser, Michigan, into a middle-class farming family where hard work on the land shaped character from an early age. His father, William Brown, managed a 100-acre dairy farm, while his mother, Ethel, handled the household, raising Charles and his two younger brothers. The family lived in a two-room wooden house where a Columbia radio served as the only window to the world. Brown, from the age of 5, listened to broadcasts from Detroit, including baseball games and news of the Great Depression, which in the 1930s reduced farmers' incomes by 70% in Michigan. At Kaiser High School, with about 50 students, Brown stood out for his discipline. He was captain of the basketball team, averaging 12 points per game, and helped his father milk cows before dawn. By 16, he worked on neighboring farms, earning $2 a day, which allowed him to buy a used Schwinn bicycle for $25. His interest in aviation awakened in 1937 when a Ford trimotor mail plane flew over the farm, and Brown, standing in the field, decided that flight was freedom from the earth. In 1939, after graduating high school with a grade point average of 3.2 out of 4, he enrolled at Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant to study engineering. But the war in Europe interrupted his studies. The Pearl Harbor attack on December 7, 1941, prompted him to drop out of college and enlist in the Army. Franz Stigler was born on December 21, 1915, in Regensburg, Bavaria, into a Catholic family with military traditions where honor and duty were paramount. His father, Caspar Stigler, served as a non-commissioned officer in the Imperial Army during World War I, while his mother, Anna, worked as a seamstress in a local workshop, sewing uniforms for soldiers. The family consisted of 4 children. Franz was the eldest, followed by sister Maria and brothers Georg and August. They lived in a 2-story apartment in central Regensburg, where the Danube River was visible from the window, and the home was filled with his father's stories of trench warfare, about gas attacks at Ypres and the Verdun meat grinder, where millions died. Stigler helped his father repair Zundap motorcycles from childhood, earning pocket money, and by 10 had built a cardboard model of a Fokker D-7 aircraft. In the 1920s, during the Weimar Republic, the economy collapsed. The 1923 hyperinflation devalued the mark to $300 billion per dollar, and the Stigler family barely made ends meet, subsisting on potatoes and bread. At the St. Emmeram Gymnasium in Regensburg, Franz excelled, especially in mathematics and physics, and in 1934, at 18, he entered the Lufthansa Aviation School in Hatzburg, beginning training as a commercial pilot. His first flight on a Junkers F-13 took place on June 5, 1935, and the instructor noted, "calm in the cockpit." By 20, Stigler had logged 200 hours, working as a courier on the Berlin-Munich route, carrying 50-kilogram loads. But the Anschluss of Austria in March 1938 changed his trajectory. Lufthansa mobilized pilots into the Wehrmacht. Brown joined the Army on January 19, 1942, in Detroit, passing the medical exam at 5 feet 11 inches tall and 150 pounds. He was sent to flight school in San Antonio, Texas, where he underwent basic training on the Stearman PT-17, completing 150 takeoffs and landings in 3 months. In 1942, after courses in Moseley, Alabama, where he logged 100 hours on the AT-6 Texan, Brown earned his wings as a second lieutenant and was assigned to the heavy bomber program. Training in Godfrey, Illinois, included B-17 simulators. He studied navigation, bombing, and evacuation, passing the exam with 85%. By September 1943, Brown arrived in England at the Seething Base, Norfolk, with the 379th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, where his 9-man crew assembled in 2 weeks. Co-pilot David Lukheimer, navigator Albert Pollock, bombardier Lloyd Jesperson, radio operator Robert Schultz, tail gunner Alexander Jacoman, top turret gunner William Reed, left waist gunner Charles Lee, right waist gunner Lawrence Shepard. The aircraft Ye Old Pub, a B-17F 70BO, serial number 423684, was transferred to the group in August, with Wright R-1820 engines of 1,250 horsepower each. Brown, as a lieutenant, completed 5 training flights, including night navigation, and awaited his first combat mission, knowing that losses in the 8th Air Force reached 20% per mission. Stigler was drafted into the Luftwaffe in November 1939 after the war began and underwent accelerated training in Jüterbog, logging 100 hours on the Bf-109E3. His first sortie occurred on June 5, 1940, over Dunkirk, where he shot down a British Spitfire, his first victory out of 22. In JG-27, an elite group under Hans Marseille's command, Stigler flew in Africa from April 1941, based at Castel Benito Airfield in Tripoli. He escorted Ju-87 bombers over Tobruk. By July 1942, he had 10 victories, including 4 hurricanes in one day over El Alamein. The loss of his brother Georg in November 1941, shot down over Tunis in a Bf-110, changed him. Stigler refused meat grinder sorties, focusing on reconnaissance. In August 1943, after the surrender in Africa, he returned to Germany with JG-1 on the Bf-109G6, with a DB-605A engine of 1,490 horsepower. The base in Bremerförde, near Bremen, included hangars for 500 aircraft, and Stigler, as an Oberleutnant, commanded a squadron of 12 pilots, conducting daily briefings on Würzburg radars. By December, his tally reached 22, but he knew one more victory meant the Knight's Cross. But the war had drained the Luftwaffe, which lost 7,000 aircraft in 1943. On December 20th, 1943, a Monday, the weather over England was clear with 5,000-foot cloud cover, temperature minus 10 degrees Celsius, 10-knot wind from the west. At the Seething Base, where 200 B-17 stood, Brown and the Ye Old Pub crew woke at 5 a.m., breakfasting on oatmeal and coffee in a 500-seat mess hall. Briefing at 7 in a 100-seat room. Target, the Focke-Wulf factory in Bremen, producing FW-190 fighters at 50 machines per month. The group of 36 bombers from the 379th, part of a 291 B-17 formation from the 8th Air Force, took off at 8:30 at 30-second intervals. Takeoff from a 7,000-foot runway, climbing to 27,000 feet in 1 hour. Brown, in helmet and oxygen mask, piloted the 32,000-pound aircraft with a 4,800-pound bomb load, 8 500-pound bombs. The flight over the North Sea took 2 hours. The crew checked systems, joking about Christmas gifts, unaware it was the first mission for 7 of 9. Over Bremen at 10:40, the bombers entered the zone. 88mm flak opened fire from the ground, tracer shells bursting every 2 seconds, and Ye Old Pub took the first hit in the nose. Shrapnel pierced the plexiglass, wounding Bombardier Jesperson in the face. Stigler and Bremerförde received orders at 9:30. Intercept, course 270 degrees, altitude 25,000 feet. He took off at 10:15 in a Bf-109G6 numbered Yellow 2, armed with 2 13mm machine guns and 1 20mm MG-151 cannon, with 400 rounds of ammunition each. Earlier in the mission, he had shot down 2 B-17s over Wesermünde, damaging his radiator. Mechanics replaced 100 tubes in half an hour, and Stigler climbed in 8 minutes, burning 100 liters of fuel. Radar showed an echo at 40 miles. He spotted a group of 20 B-17s at 30,000 feet, with P-47 Thunderbolt escorts 5 miles behind. Stigler attacked from below, downing 1 bomber with a burst into the fuselage, his second of the day. But flak nicked his stabilizer. By 11, the bomber formation exited the zone, having lost 8 aircraft, and Stigler, with 30% fuel, returned to base for refueling. 150 liters of DB-605 kerosene and 20 rounds. On the ground, he drank coffee in the hangar, discussing losses. The Luftwaffe lost 13 Bf-109s that morning, when the duty officer reported, "Lone B-17, southwest course, speed 160 miles per hour." Stigler took off at 11:25, without orders, knowing it was a chance for his 23rd victory. Ye Old Pub took 30 hits during bombing. Engine number 2 caught fire at 10:55, and tail gunner Jackman extinguished the flames with a fire extinguisher, passing out from smoke. Shrapnel pierced the tail, disabling 2 .50 caliber Browning machine guns, and wounded Shepard in the arm. Bleeding stopped with a tourniquet. Hydraulics failed, elevators jammed at 10 degrees, and electrics cut sights. Reed in the top turret fired blindly, downing 1 FW-190. Bombs dropped on target. The Focke-Wulf factory, where explosions destroyed a 1,000 square meter assembly shop. But the plane lost 800 feet in a minute, speed dropping to 160 miles per hour. Brown handed controls to Lukheimer, crawling to the nose where Jespersen lay unconscious with a broken jaw. Radio operator Schultz tried contacting base. Mayday, position 53 north, 8 east, wounded aboard. But the antenna was torn. The crew, 9 men, 2 seriously wounded, 1 in shock, prayed, knowing return chances were 10%. The 8th Air Force lost 250 B-17s that month. The plane flew at 9,000 feet, smoke from engine 4, and Brown saw in the mirror a fighter to the left, a Bf-109, 3 meters from the wing. Stigler caught Ye Old Pub in 5 minutes at 400 miles per hour. He saw foot-sized holes in the fuselage, 150 punctures, dead gunner in the tail, blood on the cabin floor, and Brown staring back with a pistol in hand. Per Luftwaffe instructions, fire at point blank, no warning. Stigler could open fire from 200 meters, guaranteeing a kill. A defenseless B-17 fell in 10 seconds. But he saw the wounded man in the turret trying to stand and recalled his commander Buda Martin's words from Africa. "Shoot the machine, not the men." Stigler closed to 3 feet, waving, "Surrender!" But Brown, not understanding, gave the middle finger. Stigler flew under, seeing the dead gunner at the console. The crew was on the brink. The internal conflict lasted 30 seconds. 23rd victory meant the cross, but execution for weakness per Goering's 1943 order. Stigler decided escort instead of attack, risking his life. Flak could down both. He took position to the right at cabin level and nodded to Brown. "Fly west." Brown, in shock, saw the German cross and braced for machine guns, but Stigler flew parallel, speed 160 miles, course 240 degrees. The escort lasted 10 minutes. Stigler signaled, "Land in Sweden," pointing to the map in the cockpit. But Brown, with a zeroed compass, held course for England, 300 miles away. Over the Borkum coast, 105mm flak opened fire. Shells burst at 50 meters. But Stigler, in formation, became friendly. Batteries ceased firing. He saw the crew's faces: Pollock, bandaging Jespersen, Schultz, praying. At the border, over the North Sea, Stigler saluted, right hand to visor, then touching the sky. Brown nodded back, and the Bf-109 turned east. Stigler landed in Bremerförde at 12:05 with 10 minutes of fuel. Mechanics reported a flak hole in the wing. He did not log the incident, statute violation, punishable by tribunal, and returned to the squadron, where pilots discussed losses. Americans dropped 2,000 tons of bombs, destroying 20% of the factory. Stigler went to sleep in a 12-cot barracks, thinking of his brother. I repaid the debt. Ye Old Pub flew 2 hours from the border. Engine 4 died at 12:30, speed falling to 120 miles. And Lee in the left blister fired at seagulls, mistaking them for Fut W. Brown, with frostbitten hands, held the yoke, losing altitude to 2,000 feet. The crew jettisoned machine guns to balance, minus 1,000 pounds. Over Huntingdon at 1340, they spotted RAF Rudford Airfield, but landing was rough. Gear wouldn't deploy. The plane skidded 500 yards across grass, stopping at the fence. Medics evacuated Jespersen to King's Lynn Hospital, fracture and concussion, and Reed in shock to London, where he lay a week. Brown reported to CO, Major Lewis Pearson, "The German escorted us, didn't fire." Pearson classified it secret to avoid propaganda. The 8th Air Force lost 66 planes that day, and a night story didn't fit. The crew dispersed on rotation. Brown flew the next mission a week later, completing 25 by May 1944. Ye Old Pub was repaired in a month, new hydraulics, engines, and downed 3 Bf-109s over Berlin in March. Stigler continued service. In January 1944, he downed a P-51 Mustang over Arnhem, his 23rd victory, but refused the cross, citing technical issues. In JG-27, he trained rookies, 50 pilots a year, focusing on boomerang tactics, attack and egress. By June 1944, after Normandy landings, the Luftwaffe lost 2,000 aircraft, and Stigler switched to the Me-262 jet fighter at 530 miles per hour, downing 5 B-17s over Rouen. In November, he was wounded by shrapnel in the leg over Cologne, 3 weeks in Munich hospital, and returned in March 1945, escorting convoys over the Baltic. Surrender on May 9th. Stigler surrendered in Kiel, interrogated at Stalag Luft III camp holding 5,000 POWs. Released in June, he returned to Regensburg, where the family home was bombed out, 80% of the city in ruins. Stigler worked as a mechanic at Munich Airport, repairing Junkers Ju-52s for 100 Reichsmarks a month, and married Helga in 1946, 2 children, Hans and Maria. Brown was demobilized in October 1945 with the Distinguished Flying Cross and Air Medal. He returned to Michigan, finished university in 1947 with an engineering degree, and joined Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, designing V8 engines, a series of 50,000 units a year. In 1949, he married nurse Jessica Lewis, 3 children, son Charles Jr., daughters Anne and Sue. Brown re-entered the Air Force in 1951 as a captain, serving in Korea on B-29s with 40 missions over Pyongyang, and retired as colonel in 1965. In St. Clair, Michigan, he opened an aircraft repair shop, 10 employees, $100,000 annual turnover, and collected B-17 models, building one every 3 months. The German story haunted him. In 1970, he told his son but stayed silent publicly, fearing judgment. By 60, Brown flew a Cessna 172, logging 500 hours, and wrote memoirs, but didn't publish. Stigler emigrated to Canada in 1953 via Rotterdam on the Queen Mary, 2,000 passengers. He arrived in Vancouver, becoming a pilot at Pacific Western Airlines, flying DC-3s on Vancouver-Seattle routes, 100 hours a month. In 1961, he moved to Air Canada, captain on DC-8s, transatlantic flights, 20,000 miles a year, and became a citizen in 1965. Family followed. Helga as librarian, children at UBC. Stigler avoided veterans, reunions in Munich recalled losses, and stayed silent on the B-17, focusing on fishing in the Fraser River, catching 10-kilogram salmon. By 70, he wrote letters to JG-27 archives, but without incident details. His grandson asked in 1985, "Grandpa, were you a hero?" Stigler replied, "I just didn't shoot." Brown began searches in 1985. In the Veterans Bulletin 8th Air Force News, he placed an ad, "Seeking German pilot who saved my crew on December 20, 1943, over Bremen. Print run 5,000 copies." A reply came a year later, from George Weiler, a JG-27 pilot in Toronto, who recalled Stigler. He was always a humanist. Weiler gave the Vancouver address. Stigler, 80, retired. Brown called in March 1987. "This is Lieutenant Brown. Thank you for our lives." Stigler, shocked, replied, "I knew you'd return." They met in June in Seattle at Boeing Field. Brown flew in a Bonanza, Stigler in a Piper Cherokee. The hug lasted a minute. Brown, 72, gray-haired, Stigler limping from an old wound. Over dinner at Seattle Fish Restaurant, they talked 6 hours. Brown showed crew photos. Stigler, diary entry. December 20th, escort B-17, Soldier's Honor. Friendship grew. In 1988, Stigler visited Seething, the base where Ye Old Pub stood, and Brown showed the museum with a model plane. They flew together. Stigler on a Bf-109 simulator at the Air Force Museum, Brown on a Me-262 reconstruction. In 1991, on the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, they spoke to Congress. Brown, "He saved 9 lives." Stigler, "War is no excuse for murder." Adam Makos' book, A Higher Call, came out in 2012. Print run 500,000, with interviews. Brown described the salute. Stigler, his doubts. They met annually, in Regensburg in 2000, where Stigler showed home ruins, and in Michigan, where Brown hosted a crew picnic. 5 survivors, with grandchildren. Brown died on November 3, 2002, at 79 from lung cancer. At the St. Clair funeral, Stigler carried the casket. "My brother." Stigler outlived him by 6 years, dying on March 3, 2008 in Vancouver at 92 from a heart attack. His gravestone reads, "Pilot of Honor." The incident's legacy lives. In 2013, the film A Higher Call was in development at Warner Brothers, budget $50 million. The 8th Air Force Museum in Poulin displays photos, Brown and Stigler by a B-17, captioned, "Honor Above War." In the JG-27 archive in Berlin, a copy of Stigler's diary with the December 20th entry. The Ye Old Pub crew's descendants, Brown's grandson, an F-16 pilot, carries his photo. The Bremen raid cost 66 B-17s and 400 crews, but saving 1 underscored. In the air, as on Earth, humanity's rules outweigh orders. Stigler wrote Brown in 1995, "I returned your Christmas." Brown replied, "You returned my life." Their story, in Air Force schools, where cadets study ethics in combat, and in the Norfolk Memorial, where a Ye Old Pub model stands beside a Bf-109. In 2020, for the 80th anniversary, descendants met in Bremen at the factory, now a museum, saluting the sky.